Space Runaway Ideon is one of these grandfather anime series that when watching this, you could really get a feel for where a lot of other anime series got their influences from, just to name a few: Neon Genesis Evangelion, Gurren Lagann, and of course Gundam, because this was actually created by Tomino, the creator of the original Gundam series set in the Universal Century timeline. Now, with this, you would expect a lot of the things that you could expect from a Gundam series, such as a lot of characters dying here, not just these random people that don't mean anything to the story. This kills off a lot of the main characters too, and it's not afraid to kill off people, which is one of the things that I liked about the series, because you didn't know what was going to happen next. You didn't know who was going to survive, and that's something that you need in a series that has a massive war. Things need to be at stake, or it just doesn't feel real. This also has these massive space battles like you would expect in a big Gundam series as well. Plus, it's got this story which evolves over time, and it's got evolving characters, and it's a pretty deep plot overall, something that I was surprised to see when watching an older mech series like this, because I expected this to come out sometime in the mid-70s just from looking at it, because this aged poorly. I was surprised to see that this came out in 1980, because just from looking at it, it aged so poorly that I expected this to come out alongside with Galaxy Express or something, because it just looked a lot older than the original Gundam series did, and I'm going to touch back on that a little bit later. The basic setup for the plot is that this is set in the distant future, around the year 2300, after humans have began colonizing planets, and apparently in 300 years time we can go light years away and also terraform planets by then. But this did come out in 1980, so I will cut it a little bit of slack with that. But anyways, this is set within the distant future, and here we see a few different races of humans, which I assume that they're humans. It's possible that they are actually aliens as they're described within this series. I took it as some sort of, metaphor about how people are splitting up as they're getting further away from each other, as how they're kind of viewing each other to be aliens when they're not, when actually they came from the same home planet originally, but it could just be because they didn't know how to draw aliens too. So here we see that one of the civilizations of humans on this one planet discovers this mysterious spaceship that was created by this ancient civilization. They found this massive ship and 3 armored vehicles that they're trying to get up and running, but they can't really get it to work right because I guess there's a difference in technology, or they just couldn't power it properly. But then, in the beginning of the story, we see another civilization of humans fly over to their planet in search of these very items themselves, because they believe them to be parts of this mechanical god which has unlimited power. Because of the disturbances that's caused by the Buff Clan landing on this planet and trying to steal these machines away, this actually awakens these 3 vehicles and also the ancient spaceship as well, where the vehicles can actually combine together, to everyone's surprise, to form the mechanical god. The soldiers of the Buff Clan will stop at nothing until this immense power is theirs, and because of this, they actually chase them across the galaxy, across the universe actually, because here we see the inhabitants of this planet get on the spaceship with these vehicles, and then they just go off into space and they activate this hyperdrive, and they're driving, or they're flying across the universe, basically stopping at different planets along the way, and each time they stop, they're still being chased by the Buff Clan, who's trying to kill them and take the power for theirself. And that's pretty much where you get the name of the show, and it pretty much lives up to that, because for the most part they're just stopping off from planet to planet, which was something that I felt was interesting at first, but actually it became pretty tedious seeing them stop at so many various different planets that kind of look the same, and not every planet really has its purpose. So they'll go to some of these planets, and occasionally they'll find someone that is moderately useful to the story there. Sometimes they meet someone more popular, but along the way they're gathering up a few people here and there, and their crew is getting larger as it's kind of, losing a lot of people, because, there's a lot of people dying. During the time that they're traveling in between planets, or when they're on these planets, they'll fight against the Buff Clan, and it's kind of weird because you don't really know what powers this mechanical god yet, but still there are times when randomly it just won't work and they'll have to struggle, or randomly it'll just get these power-ups and destroy everything around it without reason. It seems like you don't really know the reason beyond its power, until later on in the series, and it's a big spoiler about what actually powers it, so I really can't say, but I felt when watching this that the beginning, maybe like 15 episodes, and the last, moving on from the mid-20s onwards out to the last episode at episode 39, those are really the best episode, but in the center of the series, I felt that it got a bit tedious, and it was very slow paced, and it really turned me off to it, and I had to put the series down for a while, then revisit it. But there were plenty of things that I enjoyed, but in my opinion, one of the biggest flaws of the series is the pacing in the middle. I really can appreciate the story to this because there are a lot of characters that die off, such as a few main characters and a few supporting characters as well, and some of them die off in some pretty traumatic ways. There are some villains that get a little bit of development within them and they become more of a protagonist, and then you see a lot of development within some of the protagonists here as well. So moving on to some of the negative things that I have to say about this, and unfortunately there are a few because this was really a bittersweet experience for me. The pacing to this is really bad. It had a great start to it, the first 15 or so episodes, and then the last 10 or 15 episodes were great too, but then everything in the middle just dragged along with terrible pacing, and then the action was really hit or miss too, because there were a lot of times that this mechanical god wouldn't work. There were a lot of times when the action scenes were reused from previous scenes, and then the planets, not all of them really looked that different from other planets that they go to, and I really feel that if this was an anime created in the 2000s or maybe the 90s or something, then they would have definitely did that a lot better by having more interesting characters and more interesting settings on all of these planets instead of everything just looking so barren all the time, and I really felt that that was a great opportunity missed to have a lot of beauty. The fights here can be really intense from time to time, but there are other times that it really makes you feel like these mechs and these spaceships and everything really don't have any weight the way that they're moving around, but then again, I can't really fault it for that because that's kind of the way that things were done back then. So as far as the animation goes, this aged horribly. Looking at this, you wouldn't expect this to have come out in 1980. You would have thought this would have came out sometime in the mid-70s, alongside with I think Galaxy Express or something like that, because it aged so bad, aside from just the animation or the art style itself, because it wasn't really that bad. It's something you would expect to be on par with things of that age, but just the way that the characters look, because they're trying to be really futuristic, but then you've got the villains who are all wearing these leotards with these mullets and these wing cuts, and then you've got the main character that looks like Amuro Ray with an afro, and then you have the way that they try and portray the technology here, you'll have this mechanical god that can destroy planets and create black holes and fly through the galaxy. You'll have this, but then the person who's controlling it is sitting in a lawn chair inside of it. Where's the consistency with the technology? I understand that it's really old, but it did age terribly, and I really felt that this was far ahead of its time, but it was kind of being held back just by the style of animation at the time. As far as the music goes, I thought that the opening was alright. It's kind of catchy after watching so many episodes of it, but that's by far the song that I like the most out of the entire soundtrack to this, just because the majority of the soundtrack is bad in my opinion, and they match the wrong songs up with the wrong scenes, because you'll have a lot of this jazzy, funky 70s music, which is matched up with these crazy scenes of planets being destroyed and mountains being blown away and spaceships flying through planets and having everything destroyed and people dying and stuff. This stuff really doesn't match up, and it's it's very cheesy to see some of these songs matched with some of the scenes that it really doesn't match up with. As far as the dubbing to this goes, there is no dub. I watched this with the Japanese with the English subtitle, and that they did a pretty good job of that. I really have no fault with that. So, moving on to something that's related to this, this also has 2 movies to it, which I'm really glad to say that it's not actually a continuation of the story, which I kind of would have liked to have seen, because this stops at episode 39, but it was supposed to run until episode 43, but it was canceled early. There were actually 2 movies created. Each movie movie is an hour and a half long, and they're not continuations, they're actually recaps. There were some things that were changed, there were some battles that I wish existed within these movies, because the movies have a slightly better animation to them. They expand upon the ending that was rushed within the anime series itself. But still, if you're not really into older anime, and you want to give this a shot because you like mech, or just because you want to see, some history of anime, then I would recommend just to watch these movies. Overall, I would have to give this series a 7, because I did like the story, I did like a lot of the fights, and a lot of the action scenes here, but it did have bad pacing, it did have bad presentation, and it also aged poorly. Usually I try not to hold the aging of a series against it, but with this, it was pretty heavy, so I give it a 7. As far as the movies go, I'll probably give that a 7.5, because the animation was a little bit better there. It did expedite the story, but then again, at the same time, there were crucial parts and very memorable parts to me from the story that were kind of left out. Not everything, but just a few parts to that. So anyways, if you've seen Space Runaway Ideon, then let me know your thoughts about it in the comment section below. Of course, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe, comment, like, and also share it with your friends. I really appreciate all that. Thank you for watching. I'll see you later.